Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the first match preview of the 2024-25 campaign. I'm Andrew Musgrove and John Gibson is back to take us through the season. John, can you quite believe it's upon us?
I'm absolutely delighted it's upon us. The summer's lovely, the sun is lovely, but the real world includes football, competitive football, and we're back with it. It's been very quick turnaround, but I'm delighted it's here and really thirsting for the opener on Saturday.
Yeah, Southampton, of course, are the visitors to St James's Park. Great to have the first game of the season at home. How important, John, is it that Newcastle United get off to a winning start?
Absolutely 100%. Obviously, you want to get off to a flyer. It's also the type of opposition with the utmost of respect who, if you're going to do anything this season, you beat them at home. So you've got a real opportunity to get off to a flyer. We want to do it morale-wise as well because the transfer market's been extremely quiet. Yes, it isn't over yet, and it's not over till the fat lady sings, but it hasn't produced a lot of tingling of the spine. So, to have no apprehension, we get off to a flyer, and I fully expect us to. We're a better side than them, but it is absolutely crucial because if you don't beat a team like Southampton, freshly promoted, then you're starting to almost play catch up from the start. And I don't expect that to happen for 1 minute, but we have to get off to a winning start.
Now, of course, there are a couple of days until the game kicks off, but it's unlikely that any new signings will come in before then. And if they do, they certainly won't be playing, you would suspect. Is there a little bit more pressure on Newcastle United to maybe get the win and put in a good performance when you consider how underwhelming the transfer window has been in the view of many?
Yeah, I don't think there's any more pressure on the players to go and get a result, because the rest of it's got nothing to do with them. I think there's more pressure on Eddie and there's more pressure on Paul Mitchell if Newcastle do go and get a result, because if they don't, people would turn around and say, well, what have we done in the transfer market? And the answer to that is we've got Lewis Hall for 28 million, but we'd already had him for a full season and had committed ourselves to that cash. So he almost doesn't count as a new face. And outside of that, we've got two reserve goalkeepers and a cover centre forward and a free transfer man, Lloyd Kelly, who will be a good signing, but he's a free transfer. We haven't splashed the cash significantly this window. And whatever way we dress it up, whatever way Newcastle United's hierarchy would like to dress it up, the bottom line is that is disappointing to 50,000 Geordies. There's absolutely no question about that whatsoever, because we felt at the end of last season that Newcastle needed an improvement and that squad needed an improvement. Now, if you look at the squad currently, and with Newcastle's reduced workload, i.e., not in Europe, so two domestic cups in the Premier League, they have a strong enough squad if everyone remains fit. And we know that throughout the season that cannot happen and will not happen. And then we start to count the cost. And whatever way we want to dress it up, and we've still got time on our side. There's a couple of weeks before the end of the window. Newcastle have to buy. We've been saying that for week upon week upon week throughout this summer, from the end of last season, and we're at the start of this season. But it is a fact. It is startling to think we haven't spent any significant amount of money as we talk today, with Gay not through the door, and we haven't sold significantly well either, to give us wiggle room in the market so we get two players, a centre half and a right winger, instead of one or none. And I find that mind blowing, and it is disappointing. And you asked me, I think, probably a week ago, Andrew, whether it was time to start panicking. And I said, no. Well, it's still not time to start panicking, but it's certainly time to show concern.
Yeah, the more Gee chase is obviously frustrating a lot of people, John. I suspect those in the boardroom are also getting quite frustrated at it. It's been played out in the public arena slightly with Steve Parish, obviously Corner at Palace coming out and kind of giving their side of things. But you know what? I don't think he said anything wrong. I think if it was the other way around, we would be applauding that kind of communication. Palace can charge exactly what they deem fit, and it's up to Newcastle United to either put the money on the table, negotiate the price down, or walk away. I still think that deal will get done. I don't think it'll get done in the next couple of days, but I still think Mark Gee will be a Newcastle United player. And if Newcastle United don't want to pay the money, then they've got to walk away and turn to alternatives, because they need to get a centre back in. Ideally, they need to get a right winger in. But as I've said all this week on our podcast, John, and we've done a lot of podcasts. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in and watching them. I hope you're enjoying them. I think it'll be Mark Gee and no one else. I think that will be the last deal they do, last permanent deal. They might get a loan deal in for the winger from Chelsea, perhaps. But in terms of Mark Gee, big money signing, I think it's Mark Gee, and that's it. If, John, it is just a centre back and no one else, how would you deem the window?
Average. Relief that Gay's in because he's such a good player, but average because we'll have got effectively one player in who money has been spent for, because I don't count cover goalkeepers or cover centre forward as somebody that will improve the team. Might improve the squad, but not the team. So you would have Lloyd Kelly, who didn't cost anything, so he doesn't get involved in the financial fair play situation. You would have a single signing in. But you know what's frustrated me almost as much as not getting the signings in is that we haven't got the signings out. We haven't got outgoing deals, and that is why we're in a situation where we might only have one guy joining us this window, because and it's happened again. One of the reasons why we won't probably get a second guy bought this summer is because Almiron is off to America. The deal for to go to America is off, sorry. And I think that's for several reasons. They're not flush, and therefore their transfer fee wasn't going to be high. Also, the one thing they were going to have a problem with was Almiron's wages. The other thing is Miggy doesn't want to go. So, you know, if we don't sell Miggy and we can't sell Callum, we are hamstrung, and it is infuriating, and it is particularly infuriating for fans that don't know the inside out within the club, because they saw the panic we had on June the 30th to unload two players to even stay within the rules. So we have been hamstrung all the way along. Now, are we going to get Gay, or are we going to opt out because they want too much from him? Well, if we have offered up to 55 million with add-ons, which is what's been suggested now, that's within 10 million of their deal, and you would probably get them at 60. Would you walk away at this stage for 5 million, or would you say we're going to get this deal over the line, because have we got time to start all over again and get another centre half and perhaps a winger? It is a desperately frustrating time. I'm not suggesting it isn't frustrating for Paul, and most certainly will be for Eddie, but we've got to do something. And what worries me about outgoing transfers, Andrew, and I've got to mention this because I've got to be truthful, is that it's almost like Eddie doesn't want anybody to go. Everybody we could sell, Miggy, Callum Wilson, Kieran Trippier, Eddie says how important he is to the club. Well, if that's so, we don't sell anybody. And if we don't sell anybody, we certainly don't buy two players.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, whether he's just been quite cute with his responses. He's not going to chuck anyone under the bus because he knows that there's a chance they might still be at the club after the transfer window, and maybe privately he's saying other things and accepting that certain players, if the right bid comes in, will need to be moved on. We will speak about the transfer window, as it nears its close, John. Let's talk about this Saturday. How important is it that they get a win, not just to start the season with victory, but also, do you get the feeling that if they end up losing against Southampton, then any frustrations which are being kept in house when it comes to the fan base might rise to the surface? Is there an added element for a need for victory? I mean, there's always a need for victory, but given the transfer window, is it important that they don't lose and risk that irritation coming to the surface?
Oh, I mean, bottom line, definitely, because football is like walking a tightrope over Niagara Falls. You're only one step away from falling off. And that's any club, at any football side. You can get Chelsea, who can sign 60,000 players at trillions of pounds. But if they lose on the opening day, their fans will be saying, is this a basket club or not? And it is going to happen. If we lost to Southampton at home, and I think that's unthinkable, by the way, and I don't think for 1 second it'll happen, but if you presume it's a possibility because in a two-horse race anything's a possibility, then of course questions would be asked. Because unless Lloyd Kelly starts on Saturday, Newcastle will be starting with an 11, all of whom were here last season. So naturally, they would look to the transfer window and say, "Well, we've bought nobody that was capable of starting the season, so this is what you get when that happens." But I've got to stress before we sound as if we're doom and gloom on the day before the season opens that I can't think of a much better opener than the one we've got. And this side is newly promoted from the Championship. There's a massive gulf between the Championship and the Premier League, which is why all three clubs that come up a year ago went down straight away because the gulf is ginormous, and we have enough on board because we haven't got significant injuries. Yes, we have, but they're long term. Botman and Miley and Lascelles, uh, but we have got a strong enough squad. We haven't got Tonali either, but we've got a strong enough squad, or Wilson. But we still have a strong enough squad for the start of the season to put Southampton to bed. But if you're going to finish in the top four, you've got to put the big sides to bed later on. So, that's why we need extra signings. But regardless, I think our team that starts on Saturday with the subs bench we'll have, it'll be too much for Southampton, and we will start with a win. But that doesn't mean we don't need to buy anybody, because if you don't beat Southampton, you're in a relegation fight. And of
Mm.
course, we're not. And of course, we're not. I mean, if any club doesn't beat Southampton, they're going to be looking at the bottom half of the table this season, and we aren't going to be doing that.
Yeah. I think the squads, those who are there, and then when you get Tonali back, and obviously later in the year you'll have Bottom and Lascelles back, Wilson as well. I still think it's a very, very, very good squad. I think with the squad, with no additions coming in, you have to be still aiming for sixth or seventh. I mean, they were only 9 points off the Champions League last year with all the injuries. Now teams around them have strengthened. Villa in particular have added a couple of really good additions, but then they've lost their main man in the middle in Douglas Luiz. But I do still think the squad is good enough to make a good go of the top six. I think there are 2 or 3 additions away from being a really good top four side. But that being said, I think if you can get Mark Gay in, if you can get a right winger in, as much as I think it might not happen, I then think the top four is very achievable. And I've tipped them for top four, John. Maybe a little bit overly optimistic, but that's what I've tipped them to get this season. But it has to start with a win against Southampton. And you look across the board, John. It's strange, isn't it? Because on one hand, you go, "Oh, the team picks itself," but actually, if you look at the decisions he has to make, there are 2 or 3 big decisions that he has to make on Saturday when it comes to his team. And we'll start with probably the biggest one of them all, and it's Kieran Trippier or Tino Livramento at right back. Who are you going for?
It's the biggest one of them all because you know that's the decision that Eddie will mull on for more than any of the other decisions. I mean, there's a simple answer to that. I would start Livramento. Eddie may well start Trippier because of his belief in Trippier. I think Trippier's had a bad 2024. No, that's very unfair and isn't justified. He's had an average by his standards 2024. He didn't play well the second half of last season with us. He may have had problems. He may have had personal problems. All these things matter because players are human beings, and it's reflected in what they do. He had a very decent Euros playing on his wrong side, but he wasn't going to pull up any trees. Gary, for example, if you remember, was the only game he missed in the Euros was when he got a suicide pass from Trippier and had a foul the guy, and he got a match ban out of that. Um, I think, I mean, he's 34. couple of a months' time, a month away. Uh, his best days behind him. He's been wonderful, and if he stays, he'll be a wonderful part of a very important squad. But I would start with Livramento. I wouldn't be in the least surprised if Eddie started with Trippier.
Yeah, I would start with Tino Livramento. I think he's earned it. Also, if he does start with Tino Livramento and Livramento holds his place, I win a bet, my prediction last season that I made. And I don't care if people are irritated by me consistently mentioning it, but I did say Tino Livramento would be first
You
choice
don't
right back.
consistently mention it, but you did say it.
I did say it. And you've got to shout when you're right, John. You've got to shout about these things. But I do think Eddie Howe will pick you and Trippier. If he doesn't, John, and let's say he does go with Tino Livramento, is it more than just his starting 11 on Saturday? Is that a hint to the future of Kieran Trippier at St James's Park if he doesn't start that game?
Yes, whether that means transfer before the end of August or whether it means what his birth certificate tells you, that time catches up with every man and he will be a valued member of the squad, but not an automatic pick. And when he first come to us, he was an automatic pick in the way that Isaac and Joe Linton and Bruno still are. But he's not an automatic pick anymore. Time moves on, and Livramento is the future of Newcastle United. Kieran Trippier is not the future of Newcastle United. I know we're dealing with the present, not the future, but I think Livramento's done enough to have earned his place. I think he's fitter and sharper than Trippier, who's come back late from the Euros naturally and is not quite up to the pace of it. And I think on all the boxes, there's more of the boxes ticked by Livramento than there is ticked by Trippier.
Yeah, I think Livramento's just at that stage now where he needs consistent running the team, and
He's
he's proved that he can
earned
handle
it.
it. So, I think his time is now. The other selection dilemma that he's got is at centre back. We hope Fabian Schär's recovered from that knock that he took in the last pre-season friendly just under a week ago. We think he will have recovered, so he'll be obviously first choice on the right side of the centre back pairing. Then it's a question of whether it's Lloyd Kelly or Dan Burn there. I think it'll be Dan Burn. I think this game probably comes a little too soon, unfortunately, for Lloyd Kelly. Ideally, you would have wanted him to have had a full pre-season. You would want to have featured in more than the 2 and a bit games or 1 and a bit games that he has done. From what we've seen of him, John, looks like a very good player, but I just don't think he's going to be match fit. I don't think Howe will risk him. So I think it'll be Schär and Burn for Southampton.
I feel exactly the same. Shall be all right. He's always going off injured and he's always all right for the next game. So he'll be all right. Long term or short long term, Kelly will be the left sided centre half because he is, again, the future of the club. But you're right. He hasn't blown the cobwebs away like Trippier hasn't as yet in pre season. And yet again, what's new about Kelly? We've discovered that he's not quite fit enough to start, but we've discovered he's a super player. Well, Bournemouth told you both those things. He was a super player at Bournemouth, but he had injury problems. So there's nothing new in that situation. And I would think that Byrne would start this game and Kelly will come in a couple of games down the line. Will come into the starting side, I mean, because the future for me would be Livramento, Shaw, Kelly, and Hall. But at the moment, it'll be Byrne, I would think. It'll play centre half, and that's fine. And bear in mind, we're also playing Southampton, and that's no disrespect to Dan, but he'll muscle Southampton. We're not playing Man City or Arsenal or Liverpool.
He's had a very good pre-season and he's looked so good since he's been moved into that centre-back pairing. So
Of course,
I'm not...
that's nothing new, Andrew, is it?
No.
We knew we would look good moved into centre half because that's what he is.
And what has he got, John?
He's got the heart the size of a frying pan, mate.
There we
And
go, the first one of the new
got the
season.
face of a snail. Oh, sorry, that's not the bit that was the plus.
No, I think he's done well, and I'm not disappointed that I think he will start on Saturday. But it's really interesting because, I mean, let's for a minute not say they get a centre back in. I mean, they will do, but let's just for this next question.
I love the fact that you say they will. I'm very reassured because the trouble is, both you and I have been saying that since May.
Yeah,
And it hasn't happened yet.
But when you look at Lloyd Kelly, Dan Burn, and Lewis Hall, he's got three options at left back. One's not a conventional left back in Dan Burn, as we've said, looks fantastic now. He's in the middle. But I can fully see that Dan Burn ends up playing left back. If Eddie Howe goes for Lloyd Kelly in the next
Heaven
month,
forbid.
but can you not see it? I mean, I wouldn't personally. I think Lewis Hall's been excellent, and the only way he's going to get better is by playing week in, week out. He's earned that spot. But I can see Eddie Howe in the future, whether it's because of signing Mark Gay and he comes in at left-sided centre back, whether he actually plays Lloyd Kelly, it's at left-sided centre back, then he puts Dan Burn at left back, and that's a risk. It's a gamble, but I could see that happening.
Heaven forbid. By the way, heaven forbid for Dan's sake, as well as for our sake, because he's exposed to everything that's good about Dan Burn is seen when he plays centre half. Everything that's bad about Dan Burn is seen when he plays left back. That for me is the simple. He's exposed left back to pace, to not being able to turn quickly, to wide, tricky wingers. At centre half, he's 8'6". He's heading everything out. He's got all the size of a fine back. He's everything plus it's centre half and everything minus the left back. If we can't get through in the left back situation with Lewis Hall and Lloyd Kelly, we're in trouble, man. If Burn plays there, we're in trouble. My opinion, and we've all got our opinions, but my opinion.
It's interesting that Bournemouth fans saw Lloyd Kelly predominantly as a left back as well. So maybe in time he can become the first choice left back. You know, he's a good player. And I'm looking forward to seeing him when he's fully fit. But for Saturday, it's Lewis Hall, and I hope Lewis Hall keeps that spot because, like I say, he's impressed when he finally got his chance. He needs a lot of improvement, a lot of work, but I think that can only come when you are playing week in, week out, you know, competitively. And I'm looking forward to seeing him as the season goes on. I think, John, the midfield three picks itself in Bruno, Joe Linton, and Sean Longstaff. I don't think Joe Willock will be match fit for this one. And Sean's had a very good end to the preseason as well, so he's earned that spot. It's Big Joe, though, I want to talk about because he's going to be absolutely instrumental to Newcastle if they're going to have a successful season, isn't he?
Yes, oh, very much so, because he produces what others can't. He is the colossus. He is the granite, the huge unmovable granite object in the middle of the park that'll break things up, but then still has the skills to be able to go forward and create. He's not just a bruiser in the middle of the park, anything but he brings a physicality that none of our other midfield players have got. And so he's absolutely critical to the cause. He was missed tremendously last season when he was out for long periods. I think Bruno and Joe Linton, the two Brazilians, absolutely nailed on. I agree that Longstaff has done enough to start because Willock seems just off the pace a little bit. Willock is the better player and would challenge Longstaff long term, but neither of them will get in shortly because it'll be Tonali. The three in the middle of the park will be Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton. And Longstaff and Willock will be on the bench fighting to get in. And there will always be opportunities. The bit with Sean, and I love him to death. He's a local lad that does well. He cares so much about the club. He comes from a terrific family. His heart's black and white, no question about that. But he's taken a bit of stick in social media, which is a cruel platform anyway. But he's taken a bit of stick. When I see him interviewed and talk, he seems to be aware of it, like he perhaps reads social media. Because he talks about players that are easy targets within the club for disgruntled fans. And even when he scored his 2 goals pre-season, and it's only pre-season, they're not critical goals, but he didn't look particularly happy. He looked quite sad on his face. Murphy scores and his face lights up like a Belisha beacon. And isn't that lovely? But then, Sean, it's almost like he knows he's the least favourite of all the midfield players, and because he cares as much as he does, and because he's local, and because he desperately wants a new contract and everything, he looks as if he's got the cares of the world on his shoulder. And I just would love to see him enjoying his football again, playing with a smile on his face. I'm not suggesting deep down inside he isn't enjoying being Newcastle. I think he just realises these outside pressures and they're getting to him, and it's such a shame because he is a young lad that gives us 100%. He can finish. He has earned his place in a very tight situation. He's desperate for a new contract. He starts on merit on Saturday, in my opinion, and in your opinion. But I just want to see him play with the smile on his face that Jacob Murphy has.
I'm going to tip Sean Longstaff actually to really push both Joe Willock and Sancho Tonali for that third spot. I think this is his season. I think
That's
we
it.
can.
That's the kiss of death coming from you because you were the member of the Miggy fan club, and ever since you started that fan club, he's gone rapidly downhill.
Whoa, I disagree with that. I think there was that one season when no one believed and everyone was a member and he scored
Excuse me,
11
you
goals.
were
And
trying to get me to go into the Miggy fan club of which you said you were president.
no, I
And
was. I was
well,
president, but
exactly. Well, look
we
at the
had
kiss of death that turned out to be. Go
well
ahead.
minus the purple patch season in which he was instrumental in getting Newcastle United to the Champions League. Yes, it's gone slightly downhill and back to
Slightly.
how he was. But look, I believe in certain players, and I think there's a gap for Sean Longstaff. Joe Linton and Bruno do not score enough goals, but they make up for it in other areas. If Sean Longstaff can continue the goal scoring form of last season and get into double figures, then he can be that third choice midfielder. Now, he's going to be pushed hard because Tonali is quality. He's better than him. Willock is better than him. But Willock never seems to take his opportunity, has injury issues. Tonali, how quickly is he going to be up to scratch? Brilliant. He'll probably play against Nottingham Forest in the Cup. But I think Sean Longstaff, between now and probably the end of September, if we're being kind to Tonali in terms of getting that fitness up, I think he's got a fantastic opportunity to say, we're there. He's not walking straight back in. This is my spot. And to do that, he's got to score goals. And I'm backing him to do that. And fingers crossed, John, because it would be a nice way to silence those doubters, definitely.
It would. We would then. It would. But it would then open up a whole new question, which would be: have Newcastle wasted £52 million on Tonali if he can't even get in the side? I'm not talking about straight away against Spurs because he's had 10 months out. But if he doesn't nail on a place in midfield as this season develops, questions will be asked.
Yeah, but always good to have competition, isn't it? Just briefly on Bruno, I mean, we can sit here all day and praise him, but is he going to be Newcastle's captain, do you think, on Saturday?
Well, not if Trippier starts, but if Trippier doesn't start, yes. And he might be Newcastle's captain long term because how often is Trippier going to start? And is he going to still be here in September? I mean, the answer is probably yes, he will be still here in September, but will he be in the team? Will they then give the captaincy to Dan Burn, as they've done in the past, or will Dan Burn not necessarily be in the team? Bruno's nailed on to be in the team bar injury. So he is, and by the way, loved by the fans and loved by the players. I know. Big Dan is and Trips is as well, but he would look the automatic safe bet as a captain, Bruno.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he gets up to this season. Gordon, you would think is an automatic starter, although our Newcastle United to Aaron Stokes yesterday said he had a sneaky suspicion that Gordon wouldn't start and Howe would pick Harvey Barnes. Don't worry, not because he's going to Liverpool or anything, because he's not, just because he felt that Eddie Howe would look at Gordon and say, is he ready to start this Premier League season? I told Aaron to get lost. Gordon's starting, but quite an interesting take from Aaron.
Yeah. But I would tell him to get lost as well. It's a theory. I mean, it's a theory that one or two people put to me, and heaven forbid that if we want to really be revolutionary in the transfer market, and it's far too late now to go down this route, but would Newcastle sell Gordon, get a the thick end of 100 mil, put Barnes on the side and buy a super duper outside right in the centre half. But I don't want them to go down that road whatsoever, because I think Gordon is up. I mean, how quickly are we going to forget what Gordon did for us last season? He was sensational. I mean, he was absolutely in his season when he had competition for Player of the Year from Bruno and from Shaw. He was outstanding. And you know what I love about him? He looks like a little twig, on a tree that's just fallen off the tree. But he can be kicked to death, and he just gets back up, shakes himself down, and runs straight back at the fella at pace with the ball. He's got courage, and wingers need that. And no, Anthony Gordon starts on Saturday. Goodness gracious me. He starts on Saturday, Isaac starts, and Murphy starts on the right.
Yeah, you can write into Aaron Stokes and tell him that he's absolutely useless if you want, but be polite about it. Yeah, Isaac starts up top. Just cannot wait to see Alexander Isak in a competitive environment. Absolutely looking forward to that one. And then Jacob Murphy. Who would have thought it, John? Jacob Murphy, the man who wasn't fancied by Steve Bruce, who was out on loan at Sheffield Wednesday, West Brom, and looked like his career was over before he even began at Newcastle United. He's become a better player under Eddie Howe. But not only that, he's continued to impress. There's no stagnation. And he's arguably had his best pre-season at Newcastle United after having his best season at Newcastle United. And now we're all sitting here saying he starts on Saturday, belt a pre-season, and I just cannot wait to see if he can carry on the form of last season, the form of this pre-season into the new season, and just go to an even higher and better level. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does this season.
Well, by the way, when we say, Steve Bruce didn't fancy Murphy, he didn't fancy Shaw. And look how he's played for us. So he was in good company with Jacob. Jacob has definitely earned a start on Saturday ahead of Miggy Almiron, because he has looked a class up from Miggy Almiron and long before the pre-season happened. And I never read too much into pre-season. Pre-season gets you fit, gets you sharp. But, it's not competitive. I mean, I have down the years seen players look sensation pre-season and then disappear up their own trouser leg once the competitive stuff started. So I don't read too much into what happens pre-season. But Miggy has looked as if he's got one or two Ks on his shoulder, as if hitting 30 makes him think, oh, am I suddenly going to be of pensionable age very shortly? Am I not wanted as much as I was? Am I not appreciated as much? Murphy plays with a smile on his face. Miggy does as well, but this one, it lights up the whole of the stadium, the smile on Murphy's face. And he thoroughly deserves to start. He did do better last season. He's done terrific pre-season. But let me just interrupt here and say, how ambitious are we? If we are Champions League, Murphy is a valued member on the bench to come off and change the game late on. He is not a starter if you're going to be in the top four. And that is not having a go at Jacob. He's been terrific. He's up till now, if you look at his appearances, he's had just as many off the bench as he has starts. That is what his career has been at Newcastle so far. It's been as much off the bench as it has starting. He has earned the right to start. He plays with his smile on his face. He can cross terrifically. He's shown he can finish. 4 goals is still the best season he's had at Newcastle. That's all 4, and he scored more pre-season this time. But if we are going to be cruel, who said football's anything but cruel? If we are going to be cruel, Miggy is not the regular outside right for 38 games in a team that finishes. Sorry, not Miggy, Jacob. A team that finishes in the top 4. He's not a 38 game outside right.
But could he be? Because, some players have that one or two seasons where they realize their true potential. Could this
No,
be his year?
no. He's
No?
29. He's a good player. He's a super player. He's a super sub. He hasn't got it. I mean, and if he has one season, I don't want you coming at the end of the season and saying what a great season he's had. Miggy had his one season. He's capable of having one season, but if I will repeat, we might get into 6th or 7th with Murphy, the regular outside right, because and I keep my head of Miggy. I'd sell Miggy and keep Murphy for the bench. But if we are going to finish in the top four, Murphy is not a 38-game starter for the season.
I get that, and I'm going to remind you of
That's
something you
just my
said.
opinion, by the way.
No, no, and very, very valid and entitled to. You did say that Champions League season, and it was it October, November? I've reminded you about it before, and you said if Newcastle United get through the January transfer window with Miguel Almiron, they finished 10 points below the Champions League or something like that. But he ended up being the one who arguably carried them over the line to the Champions League. I know it was only one season, and he's gone back, he's reverted to type, but there's no reason why Jacob Murphy can't have another belter season and hopefully continue that
By
for the
the
next couple
way,
of years.
talking about Miggy carried over the line to the Champions League, that is a bit blighting. For a start, a defence that let in 17 goals in 38 games can say they
Yeah.
carry us over into the Champions League, because look at what the defence did last season, 60-odd goals conceded. So, and by the way, we also did disrespecting other players that had terrific season in that top four finish. I don't think Miggy carried us to the Champions League by any stretch of any imagination whatsoever. And I'm not having. I also said, and I think you asked me, and I don't know when it was, Andrew, this season. I mean, sometime during the summer. And I said, if we start with Miguel Almiron and Jacob Murphy at outside right, we don't make the Champions League. What I'm
Yeah.
saying now is if we start with Miguel Almiron and Jacob Murphy is outside right, we don't make the Champions League. We do exceptionally well in terms of maybe making Europe. It's very harsh, isn't it? But football is harsh. I mean, football is harsh enough where we're talking about Trippier being expendable this season when he's been one of the most wonderful servants we've had since he come. And we talk about what Miggy might have done to get in Europe. What did this guy do, Trippier, to get us from being a relegation side to where we were playing in the Champions League? I mean, he's been magnificent. But that doesn't mean that we can have him play for the next 4 seasons automatically through gratitude. Football is not like that. Football is a tough, tough game. I think Jacob's done terrific. I think Jacob starts on Saturday. I think he will start on Saturday, and he has thoroughly earned it. But let's not turn him into Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi in the pump.
No, let's not do that. But it'll be interesting to see if Newcastle United do indeed bring in another winger. I just can't see it happening. I mean, they've been linked to Madugi from Chelsea. Obviously, they've gone and signed Pedro Neto, so he is now available, 22 years of age. But I just wonder whether he's got the right temperament to come into Newcastle United. I mean, I could see a loan deal potentially being done there. A good relationship with Chelsea, something similar to that Lewis Hall deal. But I don't think it's going to be, a top class permanent right wing signing. Unfortunately, that's just my opinion. And as we said there, John, Alexander Isak up front, and he's going to get a lot of goals this season. Is he going to get the Golden Boot?
It would be a lovely thought. Certainly, in terms of ability, he could get the Golden Boot. And I know it's a savage thing to have to do when you think of Haaland and everybody else that is playing in the top clubs and playing for Liverpool who make goals for fun. But I tell you what, going forward, last season, which was a very average season by our hopes, was an average season, 7th out of Europe, no domestic cup final, etc., etc. But he scored 25, and he looks quality. And you know what? We better do well this season in getting to Europe, because you only hold on to Isaac if you do that. In a year's time, when he's still a young man, if he's got another 25 goals and we aren't in the Champions League, try holding on to him.
No, I'm sure the club are well aware of that, most certainly. And on the bench, like you say, probably Miguel Almiron, Harvey Barnes. So you've got 2 good impact players there. Joe Willock, another one. You got Asula as well, who had a good outing against Brest. You will likely have Sanusi as well, who's looked very good every time he's appeared. So they have game changers on the bench, John. We hope that they'll not need someone to come and win them the game, but it would be good to see some of those getting out in, because I think it's a big season for Harvey Barnes. I do think Sanusi's got a lot to offer, and who knows, it might be Almiron's farewell game. Although, do you know what? I don't see him leaving this summer. Again, just my opinion. That's
Oh,
not me being biased because I'm the former chair of the McGolmian fan club. It is closed down now, but I can't see him going. There doesn't seem to be any suitors in Europe.
and he doesn't want
MLS
to go.
haven't got the money. So, and look, if he stops, I hope he gets the support and backing of fans because I have to say, some of the reaction over the last few days towards Miguel Almiron on social media has been absolutely disgraceful. Whatever you think about him, he's always given his all. Always given his all. Yes, he lacks that end product for the
Oh,
majority of the time. But, you know,
social media is horrendous, Andrew. I've just talked about it earlier in this podcast with Sean Longstaff, and that would the effect that I believe personally that it's had on Sean. That he's taken the cares of the world on his shoulder. It is a terrible, terrible media, which in the old days, Kevin Keegan's entertainers and further back, and players didn't have to tolerate. Players will always get criticised by reporters, by fans, by everybody. That's the nature of the game. But in the past, that criticism has been reasoned argument. It has been saying he's not quite good enough, he hasn't done. Now, it's almost as if you were a murderer at times. It is awful and it is dreadful, and really, it's something that's got to be addressed. But that's a heavy subject for another day and for other people, not for a sporting hack like me. But it is shocking and has got to end. It is absolutely disgraceful. My heart goes out to players. I will criticise players. You will criticise players. The manager will criticise players. The fans will criticise players. And as long as you do it with respect and stress it's your opinion, that is okay. It has always been so since the game was invented. But what happens now with some trolls sitting at home up in the attic just spitting out venom when they can't be traced and they haven't got to face the consequences is absolutely shocking. And yes, I mean, not just Miggy, but everybody, Sean Longstaff, everybody else. Please do not do that. It doesn't help and it's undeserved. We're all
mm.
human beings.
Yeah, and the clue is in the title of the football club, Newcastle United. That's what I always go back to. Before I get your score prediction, John, or result prediction, we'll still do the result predictions
Yeah.
this season. I'm going to read you some stats because I know you're a big fan of some stats, aren't you?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Off you go.
let me let me read you a few. Newcastle United have won their opening Premier League match in both campaigns under Eddie Howe. They haven't won their opening league match in 3 seasons in a row since between 82-83 and 84-85, while the last manager to do so with the Magpies was, do you know?
Go on.
It was Joe Harvey between 72-73 and 74-75. So good old Joe with another bit of history there. Newcastle United have won 7 of the last 9 Premier League games versus Southampton. They've won the last 3 in a row. The Saints have won just once in 18 games at St James's Park. You've got to go all the way back to 2015 when they won in the January of that year with Ronald Koeman in charge. Newcastle United have lost just 1 of their last 20 games against promoted sides, although that might be 26 because I can't read me writing, but I think it is 20. It is 20. They've won 11, drawn 8. So there you have that one. So, history, statistics on Newcastle's side this Saturday, but as we know, that matters little. How is the result going to go?
The whole of those stats that you've just read out don't matter one single jot come 3 o'clock on Saturday. Do you think Isaac's going to run out and say, "Oh, we've got a job on today. We've never won 3 successive home opening day fixtures since Joe Harvey's"? Do you think they know, care, or anything? I tell you what depends on Saturday is the 11 we put out, the 11 they put out, and the attitude of the two sides. What matters. Those figures, and I'm not having a go at you because they're not your figures, but I'm just having a flip. Those figures don't matter a monkeys and have no effect on Saturday's game whatsoever. Eddie Howe has an effect on Saturday's game, and the 11 that start have an effect on Saturday's game, and my Jove, the crowd have an effect on Saturday's game because they can roll over Southampton on behalf of the team. How's it going to go on Saturday? We're going to win, of course.
Hmm.
And I normally, and I stress to you, and I always do that, that I don't want to go on forecasting a score because that's a lottery. It can be anything. But all I'll say in terms of the score, I think we'll win convincingly. 3-0 is convincing. 4-1's convincing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be tight. We'll score a few goals. We have too much firepower for them. All the goals we scored, 80 odd goals last season. You look at our front three, Murphy, Isaac Gordon. You look at the midfield, Joe Linton, Bruno, Longstaff pushing on, etc., etc. We've got too much firepower for them. We won 5-1 on the opening day of last. Here's a stat. You love stats. 5-1 opening day last season against Aston Villa. Aston Villa qualified for the Champions League. Southampton are newly promoted. Nothing like as good as Aston Villa. And we won 5-1 on the opening day of last season. How about repeating that?
No, indeed. And you know what, John? I've realised we've nearly got to the end of the episode and I haven't really asked you anything about Southampton. I don't know if that's me being careless or just thoroughly underestimating the Saints. Um, Speaking to the Saints reporter for The View from the Opposition, which will come out on Friday morning, he was telling me how they do like to play around at the back with the ball at their feet, although Alex McCarthy, who's likely to be in goal, isn't overly comfortable with that style of play. If Newcastle United can get that high energy press back that we have seen through the preseason, that was missing for large parts of last season, then they can punish Southampton, can't they?
Oh, we should win comfortably. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I'm not underestimating them. The biggest thing, the biggest worry for us is to underestimate them. Because then you're scrambling around to sort of change the flow of the tide, and once the tide's flowing in one direction, it's very difficult to turn it around. The biggest threat to Newcastle United is complacency. I don't think they'll be complacent. I think they've got far too many good guns and big guns for Southampton. They've made quite a few signings in the summer, but are they world beaters? With the utmost respect to people like Brereton Diaz, who's a good player, Lallana, who used to be a good player, etc., etc. No, I don't think they're anybody to frighten us. I'm comfortable with this game. I'm uncomfortable with the transfer market and what's to come for the rest of the season, unless we suddenly do something great. But I'm very comfortable for this game.
Well, hopefully, John, next time we speak, which will be Wednesday next week, Newcastle United will have not only won this game, but they will have made some signings in the transfer market, hopefully, Mark Gee. But thank you very much for popping on and providing the first match preview of the new season. To you guys watching, give the video a thumbs up. Hit subscribe on the channel. Get into the comments. Let us know what you think about any of the hot talking points that we've just discussed in this episode. If you're listening on the audio channel, thank you. As always, leave us a rating and review and share the pod amongst your Newcastle United supporting friends and family. And for myself, I'll be back tomorrow with the view from the opposition. We'll then have the match verdict on Saturday from Aaron. And then we will have the Just Take 3 episode with me and Sam Milner as well on the Sunday morning. So a whole week of podcasts and a whole week next week to come as well. I hope you've been enjoying the content. I'll see you guys very soon.